Travolting presents The Fraser's Edge. Hosted by Jeff Sweeney and Stuart Elmore. Covering The Quiet American. Enjoy the episode.
Hi, Jeff. Hi.
How are you?
I'm good.
I'm doing pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah. You know, Jeff. It's very resembling of American foreign policy to not try to shoehorn its will into foreign affairs. It's almost like
America
it's like
has never interfered in the global politics of another country before.
because they're the quiet Americans.
Yeah.
That's right, folks! I hope I just blew out your speakers because you cranked the volume to hear that. Yeah, that's right. This week we're covering The Quiet American.
The quiet American.
Welcome back to Travolting Presents The Fraser's Edge. Thank you so much for listening to our episode last week on The Mummy Returns. We hope you enjoyed that. We're covering a very different tonality of movie today.
Yes, but for a reason.
Yes.
For a good reason, which we will talk about.
Yeah, we're covering a movie it's more in line with the movies that Fraser wants to be doing at this point, which I think is fascinating, coming up after the run that we've just encapsulated with, Mummy, Dudley Do-Right, Bedazzled, Monkey Bone, The Mummy Returns, where he's kind of being put into this, like...
The lovable goof,
action star, popcorn movie realm.
Yes.
Whereas this film, The Quiet American... comes back to, the movies that he has talked about really adoring and loving, having worked on, such as
Gods and Monsters,
School Ties,
a little bit of Still Breathing.
I'd say even like The Passion of Darkly Noon.
Yeah.
These more
dramatic
roles.
Dramatic roles. And this one is another, what we classify, specifically Gods and Monsters, and what was that fucking...
Well, it's the run of like Gods and Monsters,
School Ties,
With Honors, The Scout, all these movies where he's being put with a veteran actor.
A veteran actor, yes. Yeah.
And he's given a meaty supporting role. That's the sequence of words I was looking for.
Yeah. And I would say that this isn't quite yet like his last one that we would sort of classify.
No, this is not his last drama.
It's not his last drama, but it's also, I would argue that it's not his last, like, let's put Fraser together with a veteran actor type movie.
We continue to get that up through Extraordinary Measures.
Yeah.
That's his last one of those.
Yeah. And this one...
By that point, he's in his 40s.
But here's the thing that's interesting, Jeff, that I wanted to put out there. So we talked about that this is a really interesting shift for Fraser for like his recent run. But here's the thing. Did you know this movie was delayed like a whole year before its release?
Yes, and I want to hold off on the reason why for a moment. I want to get through the context of the movie before we explain why it got delayed.
Absolutely. 100%.
Because I think it's important to know what this movie's about.
Yes.
Before we explain why it was pushed.
Right. You're right. Yeah. So just a real quick, like 2-second log line thing about it. The main character is Michael Caine.
Yes, playing Thomas Fowler, who's a
British
London Times reporter stationed in Vietnam in 1952,
who is covering the early. Back then, it wasn't called the Vietnam War just yet.
No, this was the French Indochina War, I believe it was called.
Yes, French Indochina War, which was like French colonialist.
Yeah, it's called the First Indochina War.
Yeah, yes, and so this is where Vietnam is occupied by French colonialists, and this is the early start of Vietnam getting introduced to communism.
Yes.
In which there are these communist pacts forming.
Ho Ho Chi Minh being the main leader of the communist movement at this time.
Yes, and so this is sparking some uprisings and rebellions, and this is where, we are getting the early onset of the full civil war as we know as the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
This is like the early, if think of like the American Revolution, this is like the French and Indian War.
Yes.
That was a good comparison.
No, that is accurate.
That is, yeah.
This is Vietnam starting to fight for its independence.
Yeah.
And it does win.
Yeah.
Essentially. The 17th parallel, the country gets split into North and South Vietnam.
Yes.
South remains democratic, North remains communist.
Yeah.
And then eventually an invasion of the South is undertaken by Ho Chi Minh and the communist, Viet Cong.
Mm-hmm.
Or Viet Minh, I believe they were known at this time.
At this time, yeah.
Which results in American interventionism, which results in the Vietnam War, which eventually results in the United States' defeat in the Vietnam War.
Yes. And so Michael Caine, who this is not quite yet when like Americans are putting boots on the ground and airstrikes are being made. No, this is where we hear about the American supported coups.
Yes.
This is in that tonality.
Yeah.
Where American,
the CIA is fucking around.
The CIA is fucking around with this civil war and trying to sprinkle in its own American agenda with however the outcome goes. They haven't quite put their chips full in on the anti-communist Vietnam yet. They're starting to.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting part in history because I looked at when I was first researching this, like, 1952. It's like, that's like too early for Vietnam. And then I realized, there was the whole like 17th parallel thing before Vietnam War actually started.
For anyone who's interested in this topic, we'll wrap up kind of summarizing it. But if anyone's interested, the Vietnam War documentary by Ken Burns, it's tremendous. It's an 18-hour-long documentary.
Fuck.
It is incredible. Would highly recommend watching it.
Where can they find it, Jeff?
You can find it, I believe it was PBS. So you should be able to I have a Blu-ray of it, but
of course you
can find it in a lot.
As I look to my left and see a bookshelf of American president biographies.
Yes. It's a 10-episode show. It's well worth watching if you're interested in
I might pick it up.
Yeah, if you're interested in the history of the Vietnam War.
Yeah, I found myself interested in studying the history of this as I was watching this movie to understand the context.
Yeah.
Because it's important to know when you jump into this movie, like, this is not a Vietnam War film.
Yes. This is about what led to the Vietnam War.
Yes. This is very much not a Vietnam War film. To round it back to the movie. So yeah, Michael Caine, British reporter. He's out here at Saigon, Vietnam, sort of reporting on the occurrences and events happening in this civil war happening.
Yes.
And he's simply just reporting what he sees.
Yeah.
Sending this info to the London Times, and he has a lover, a young Vietnamese woman named Phung.
Yes.
Who lives with him. He is married to somebody in London, but he's with somebody over here. Common characteristic. He then meets a young Brendan Fraser playing Pyle.
Yeah, not Private.
You
Pyle.
almost said Private Pyle. Yeah,
playing Alden Pyle.
Alden Pyle. Well, I would say like the opening guise of his mission is that he's operating an American-led medical aid, but we quickly find out that he is a CIA operative.
Yes. Who
is infiltrating and sort of diverging. Essentially, this is where the term like third force comes from. Yeah. And if you haven't heard of like the term like third force, is, as we discussed earlier, it's like this is the Viet Minh, the communist-led Viet Minh with the French colonialists. This is where we get another a militia-led Vietnamese group led by a non-communist general.
Yeah,
I don't know how else to like describe.
Trinh Minh Tay, who was an actual figure.
Yes,
this is all based in.
Reality. Who is getting support from CIA operatives, which is pictured in the figure of Alden Pyle, the CIA operative. And so the movie sort of takes this quick spin of like, we on one hand we have like, a British reporter who believes in non-interfering.
Yeah.
and is seeing the destruction and wake of this, as well as seeing the accelerated destruction brought on by American interference.
Yeah. The core like idea of the movie is that he's a reporter and he doesn't have opinions. He just reports what happens.
Yeah.
And it's about learning to care in his character, learn to care about Vietnam, learn to care about its people.
Yeah.
But also struggling with falling in love with someone who represents the thing you're trying to not care about.
And there is a love triangle in this movie because Alden Pyle, Brendan Fraser, falls instantly in love with Fung.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of a shifty... We'll talk about it. I wasn't as like indebted to this part of the movie, but there's a little shiftiness going on with that. And do we want to say what happens at the end? Or?
I mean, at the end, we can talk about the ending when we go through the plot. This is just to give kind of a summary for the audience so they know where we're coming from.
So now that we've like explained like
what this movie's about,
and this movie's based on a book that came out in 1955.
Yes. In 1955, the book The Quiet American came out.
Yes.
It's based on that.
The book written by Graham Greene.
Yes.
Who is a British author.
The thing that's interesting about this book is that it comes out in 1955 before America is like openly involved in Vietnam.
Right.
And it's very much a book that's hypercritical of American like interventionism and what it could lead to.
Yes.
Which, as history knows, does lead to the Vietnam War.
Yes. It called its shot and it hit the mark.
Yeah. The thing that is funny is that an adaptation of this book is made in 1958. There's another version, which is a movie about how the communists are bad and the Americans are helping out, getting rid of them.
Yeah, exactly. And so, needless to say, when this book came out in 1955, it immediately received huge criticisms on the American side.
Yeah.
Because of being hypercritical of American as it is, like this book got a lot of slack for it. I think it still won a Pulitzer Prize, though.
Yes. And the movie gets a lot of praise from everyone who's not fucking...
We talking about this movie or the
1958 version?
The 1958
It gets praise from everyone except for Graham Greene, who's like, they've destroyed the purpose of my book. They've turned it into a propaganda film for Americans.
Yeah.
And so this adaptation of The Quiet American
is much more true
to the original idea.
Yes. And that and
it exists because of that.
Yeah, and that I think that brings us to like sort of modern context of the movie.
Yes.
So, as we discussed, this is an interesting shift in Fraser's career of going from like we saw like Gods and Monsters in 98, and then like and then before that like Still Breathing was still kind of in this dramatic role era, and then after Gods and Monsters, The Mummy, and then or Blast from the Past and The Mummy, and then we get all those like rom-com-esque comedy action.
Yeah, the popcorn movies.
Yeah, and then we get this movie back. But what's interesting is this movie was delayed a year because of the September 11th attacks.
Yes. So this movie has its first screening September 10th, 2001.
Oh, I didn't know about this.
Yes. The first screening of this movie is September 10th of 2001.
I'm just now hearing about this for the first time.
And it's screened. This movie is funded by Miramax, which was the Weinsteins, Harvey and Bob, before Harvey is now thankfully sentenced to prison for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
But they screen it, and it's like everyone loves it.
Yeah.
Everyone they're showing to, they're like, okay, we got an Oscar winner in our hands.
Yeah.
The next day, the Twin Towers are attacked.
Yeah.
And American populism like
shoots up.
And this movie, which is about Americans shouldn't interfere in other countries'
affairs,
and that it just leads to more violence, would not play well in the immediate aftermath of 9/11. So, and maybe smartly, I mean, I think that, this movie has a very good point. And I think, especially in like the post 9/11 era, that point was so important for people to perhaps think about.
Yeah.
But I can understand from a purely business decision why this was pushed.
Absolutely.
It gets pushed a year. And it comes out in a time when people are starting to evaluate how America responded to 9/11 and whether that was in our best interest as a country or as a people.
Yeah. And so I think just to timeline it up a little bit, that sort of makes me think that this movie was filmed at sort of end of 99, beginning of 2000.
Yeah, this would have been filmed in probably 2000.
Yeah, which is still like a few years after his like dramatic role phase, going into like the popcorn movie phase.
It would have basically been right after The Mummy.
Yeah.
They filmed this.
And I mean, we've said it before, but these are like the good roles for Fraser. We like seeing him in these types of roles.
Yes.
They are almost always bangers and wins for him. It is always like, I always say that with like a tad bit of grain of salt, because like, as we said in Gods and Monsters, and I think what we will say in this movie is that the more experienced veteran actor acts circles around Fraser.
Yes.
And I do have to say it's less so with Michael Caine and Fraser, or with Ian McKellen and Fraser in Gods and Monsters, but still there with Michael Caine and Fraser in this movie.
Yeah.
Fraser's gotten better, but I still don't think he's not at like Michael Caine caliber.
And his character in both movies is not as...
Correct. Yes. Yeah. In this movie, he's playing an archetype.
Yeah. Like, and Fraser is good at what he's doing. So he's playing... You know, what this movie interestingly does with Fraser is that it's using him as an archetype of all-American hero.
Mm-hmm.
And then twisting that at the end.
Yeah, which is smart.
It's smart that it takes like his persona at the time is all-American hero.
Yeah.
And when you put him in the movie, you're like, oh, Brendan Fraser, he's great, he's an all-American hero. And then by the end where you learn he's up to shifty shit, it's like, okay, this is a smart flip of the narrative of what we expect from this guy.
I mean, Ricochet O'Connell fought in the French-Libyan Wars and the Mummy, right?
Yeah.
So wouldn't it make sense if his next stop is Vietnam?
Yeah, 40 years later, he time travels. He's in the Book of the Dead or something.
Is it 40 years later?
I mean,
30 years later.
30, yes.
It was 1923 or so.
Yeah.
So he would have been like a little bit older, but still.
Yeah.
But it's imaginable.
Yeah.
And it's smart. And it helps his character. But he is still playing like a subtextual archetype.
Yes.
It's hard to as an actor, I'm imagining, I have no context or basis for this, but it's hard as an actor to be like, the notes for you and how to guide your performance is you are the face of American like colonialism.
Yeah.
Go action. You're like, ugh. You know, like that's hard to work with. Whereas Michael Caine has a lot to work with in this movie.
He's playing a character.
He's playing a character who has a life, who has wants, who has desires, who has flaws.
And the movie's all told from his POV.
Yes.
So we get more into his internal life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Important to note, this movie is directed by Philip Noyce,
Mm-hmm.
who's mostly a director of political thrillers.
Yeah.
He directed both the Harrison Ford Patriot Games and Clear and Present Danger,
Mm-hmm.
which are movies with similar... they're both based on Tom Clancy novels, but they have similar questioning elements of American foreign policy.
Yeah. And then he did The Giver.
Yeah, he did The Giver, which doesn't make sense. He also did Salt, that Angelina Jolie movie where the poster is just a picture of her that says, "Who is Salt?" And I'm like, I don't know. Who is Salt? And then you got to tell me, buddy. I'm not directing the fucking movie.
Right.
He also did The Bone Collector.
The Bone Collector.
Yeah, the Denzel movie. He's still a fairly prolific director. Just worthy of note that he's a real one.
Yeah.
Oh god, I just deleted my Philip Noyce page and accidentally deleted all my stuff. All right, reopening.
He's got a lot
He's directed a lot of movies.
Well, no, he's got a lot of movies in development in production right now.
He's busy.
He's a busy boy.
Busy guy.
Busy boy. Born in Australia. So he's not even American. The fuck he can say about American policies? We're the winners.
Yeah, all right. The problem with American policies, in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's essentially the core of the context of this movie.
Yeah, I think so too.
It getting pushed a year is the big of this movie.
Yeah.
But it does come out, and Michael Caine does get an Oscar nomination for this movie.
You said Michael Caine.
Michael Caine.
Yeah.
Michael Caine.
Who we've talked about on this show before.
Yeah, we have. Coincidentally, the exact same year.
No shit.
These movies come out very shortly.
2002. What a busy year for Michael Caine.
Let me find out what day Goldmember comes out. I'm guessing it's May. Goldmember is released July 26th of 2002. This movie comes out September of 2002, only 2 months apart.
Wow.
Two Michael Caine movies. We've now covered Michael Caine's entire 2003. Or
Really?
2002.
Really?
Yes, between Goldmember and this.
Good year for Michael Caine, 2002.
Yeah, good year.
Very
Gets an
good.
Oscar nomination. He gets to say, "There's only two types of people I hate in this world: those who are intolerant of other people's cultures, and the Dutch."
Yeah. A funny line considering the role he plays in this movie.
Yes. There's only two types of people I hate in this world: those who are intolerant of other people's cultures, and the Americans.
The Americans who do that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, when we talk about the plot of this movie, it's gonna feel to me a lot like Gods and Monsters.
Yeah.
This movie, it has a lot of business.
Yeah.
Um.
That's why I wanted to do that summary up front.
Yeah.
And so we don't have to be as like specific about scene by scene. We can just kind of summarize the things that we liked and the things we want to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, like, we get started, and oh my God, Michael Caine just with the voiceover in this opening.
The thing about Vietnam is
I think about Saigon, Vietnam. It's like
falling in love with
I
Vietnam.
could listen to this intro and it could put me to sleep.
Yeah.
It is so like, but it's also a good encapsulation of like what this movie's doing and like who this person is, because he's talking about, you know, the thing about Vietnam is it solves, if you're coming here with questions, it gives you answers right away.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a lot of things you have to adjust to, but after a while it sort of takes hold of you and you feel like you can't ever leave or something like that. But you know, we don't know anything about this guy other than like whoever's talking is like a huge admirer and has a lot of love for Vietnam, the Vietnamese people and the culture. And so Michael Caine, as we get we get a flash forward, which that was interesting. We see Michael Caine walking on the docks.
Yes.
And he looks down and he sees a body.
Yeah.
With like a stab wound
Yeah.
floating in the water. Police arrive and they take the body and we identify it as Brendan Fraser.
Something I also like is that the opening shot of this movie over the narration is just like
It's a still
image
shot.
of like the docks.
Yeah.
But deep in the background, you can see
like artillery
gunfire
flashes.
shooting in the sky.
Yeah.
And he's just ignoring it, which is his perspective in this movie. is that
Yeah.
he's all about the beauty of Vietnam and not the violence of it, which is occurring in the background.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
It's good shit, baby.
Yeah. And then
I like this movie.
Yeah, no, this is a good movie.
Yeah. I'd watch it again.
Yeah, no, it's a very good movie.
Yeah. And so we get introduced to Brendan Fraser's corpse, Alden Pyle.
Yeah, and then it starts farting, and that's the rest of the movie? No.
If only. We then get introduced to a character we're only going to see one more time, and that is Inspector Vigo.
Yeah, Inspector Vigo. I love
played
this guy.
by Raid. I'm going to butcher his last name, and I apologize, but Rade Serbedzija?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe.
Sure.
What's funny is this guy plays like your stereotypical French or Russian inspector type.
Yeah, he's,
like you can
he's
see,
a Croatian actor.
He's like, you can see like we have a theory on who did this crime, and I think it was you. Like that's his character.
Yeah.
And not just this movie. Do you know he plays a homeless guy in Batman Begins?
Yeah, he's the homeless guy who Batman hands the coat to.
Nice coat.
Yeah, nice coat. He's also the reason I recognize him is he's in Mission Impossible 2. He's the doctor who Tom Cruise is getting the whatever the gas is in that movie.
Yeah.
He's the one who Tom Cruise meets in the opening scene, who's in the plane crash.
Yeah.
He is also in both the last two Harry Potter movies, apparently, as Gregorovich. I don't remember. I mean, I remember that character, but I don't remember him being in it.
Oh,
He's the other
He's
wizard.
the guy that gets the Elder Wand stolen from him.
Yeah, by young Dumbledore.
Young Dumbledore.
Yeah. He's also he's in X-Men First Class as Soviet General. He is in the series 24 as Soviet general.
Yeah, he plays a very common Soviet general a lot.
Yeah, he is. I'm trying to find how many times this guy's been credited as Soviet general. He plays Big Daddy in a movie called El Kot Ubinzen.
Well, who's that guy that we looked at his IMDb and it's like captain, lieutenant, general, generals?
God, what's his name?
Fucking hell.
Glenn Morshower.
Glenn Morshower. There's got to be a movie where it's Glenn Morshower on one. Wait a minute.
X-Men First Class.
Right?
Yeah.
Because Glenn Morshower's on one side holding, like, with their artillery. Oh, no. Glenn Morshower isn't like a general. He dies early on. He's like a CIA operative, isn't he?
Yeah, he's something.
Or no, he's a general that approves the missile strike or whatever.
He's working with Kevin Bacon at the beginning.
Yes.
I haven't seen X-Men First Class in a little bit,
but that is the epitome of their roles in this movie.
It's those two together.
They make one. They make the Cold War movie. But it doesn't matter because we're not going to see him at all in this movie ever again until the very end.
Yes.
Because he's an inspector. He's analyzing the body in front of Michael Caine. He's like, "Did you know him?" He's like, "Yeah, I knew him. He was a good guy." And he's like, "Well, I suspect some foul play in this. Obviously, well, there's chances it might have been communist or militia. No one really knows."
Yeah.
And then same flash forward, he goes and sees Feng.
Yeah.
Who he sees her and he tells her, it's like, "Hey, like, I know that you admired him a lot. He's dead." And she says, "Okay, I think I'll go back home to see my mother," or something like that. It almost feels like we don't have any context into Feng and Michael Caine's relationship yet, and so it seems like he's just telling Alden Pyle's lover that, "Hey, your lover just died," or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think it's at that point we then are transported back to present.
Yeah, the bulk of the story takes place. It is funny. We get like this shot of Michael Caine, like he's carrying a newspaper and he's walking into this like little street side cafe at like a corner. And we're just watching this shot, and we just start hearing, and he's just like, God damn in the narration, he's like, "Every fine evening, I'd sit there and I'd order a funny branca. I had this fantasy that I'd see you there across the table, and then oddly Christian Bale's at the other table. It's weird.
Fucking knew you were gonna go there, man. Clocked it right away.
I only thought about it because I think that scene is very funny because Michael Caine's very specific about how he's in The Dark Knight Rises. Sits down, he's like, "Every day I'd sit down, I'd order a funny branca." Every day I'd order a funny branca. I'm like, Michael, stop with the fucking Fernie brancas.
It is exactly like verbatim that.
What is in a Fernie branca?
Are you even saying that right? I don't even know if that's a word.
Fernie branca is an Italian brand of Fernet, a type of Amaro or bitters.
Sounds
okay,
British.
So it is just like the liquor is Fernet Branca. 39% alcohol. Michael Caine's getting fucked up.
Damn, 60 proof.
Dark Knight. That's why he's seeing Batman across the table. He's knocked up on the fucking Fernet Brancas.
Yeah. So yeah, is that in the modern day or in the flash forward when he's in the cafe?
That is the flash forward, and then we go back.
Yeah,
I think we go back to him at the cafe. Like that's kind of the transition point.
Yeah. And so he's like we get sort of a day in the life of him. Like he's in his cafe. He goes
to the cafe to listen, to find information that he can write about.
Yeah.
He also likes to watch Feng enter the building, make sure she's okay.
Yeah.
And he's like, this hotel is where every foreigner stays, so that's where you meet people.
Yeah, right. The Continental.
Yes. And that's where he immediately meets.
Is it that quickly?
It is that quickly.
Damn.
Alden Pyle sits at the table next to him.
Yeah.
And
Brendan Fraser.
And then they're introduced to each other.
Yeah.
This movie's very economical. It doesn't waste time. It's only 100 minutes long.
Yeah. I felt it's 100 minutes, but,
not
in a necessarily good or bad way. So Brendan Fraser's Alden Pyle introduced himself. He's American, and what he tells him is he is assisting an American medical aid foundation.
Yes.
And there's this like disease that's like running rampant on the countryside that affects your eye or something that's treatable, but he's trying to help the locals out with that.
Yeah.
Which is a very smart move. It's a disarming to be like, like Doctors Without Borders, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's hard to try to like.
But you're secretly a CIA operative.
But you're secretly a CIA operative.
That actually happened.
Yes.
Probably still happens, but.
Well, yeah, it does.
But they meet up. They quickly become friends.
Yeah, so because Michael Fowl, when they meet up, I'm trying to think what their like initial like bonding point was. I think it was just something that like like Alden Pyle's like new to the area.
Yeah.
And he's giving him like a little tour around, and there's like gunshots and grenades going off. Yeah. He's like, "What was that?" It's like, "Oh, that's a grenade." I'm like, "Is he sure it wasn't a car backfire?" It's like, "You stay here long enough, you'll know the difference."
Yeah. And they quickly become friends, and a lot of their scenes involve like debates about the concept of liberty.
Mm-hmm.
It's where Michael Caine explains his philosophy of like, essentially non-interventionism, or just like not really having an opinion.
He says, "I report the facts, nothing but the facts. I only report what I see."
Yeah, and Alden Pyle, meanwhile, is like, Americans, we should bring liberty to this country.
Yeah, we should help them.
Well, how do you define liberty? It would be different here than there.
Yeah, if you
give the people vote here and they vote for Ho Chi Minh, is that liberty?
Right.
If they vote for a communist, is that liberty?
Yeah.
And Alden Pyle's just like, he has a very straight-laced view of the world, cannot comprehend that.
Right. It's like, well, communism is bad.
But what Alden Pyle can comprehend is that Michael Caine's got a smoking hot babe.
Yes.
By his view.
Pause. I think it's worth talking quickly about the fact that like Fung in this movie is like 21 years old.
Yes. Oh no, she's incredibly young, and Michael Caine is 68.
Yes. The movie does not shy away from it either. There's a sex scene in this movie.
Yes.
A not graphic sex scene. Like, you don't see anything. But there's like a line where it's like, "Oh, please, I am old." Yeah. Like, he even says it. Yeah. Like, they're not even trying to pass him off as like 40s or 50s. No, he's 68 in the movie.
I did want to talk about this, that I think the Fung aspect of the movie is the most dated.
Yes.
This is a book from 1955, and the core of it still kind of comes down to two older men fighting over a young woman's heart.
A young foreign woman's heart.
Yeah, a young foreign woman's heart who isn't really given much agency or character to herself.
No. And
she gets this movie has a lot of I'm trying to think of a movie that's similar to this. There are plenty, but where it's a movie that's very supportive of a foreign country's independence and critical of the American aspect of it, that still foregrounds its experiences in an American character or like in a white character.
Yeah.
This movie is about Vietnam interventionism and how it was misguided and the Vietnam people should be left alone. But it does, however, star two white actors. And it's about them learning this lesson.
Yeah.
It's not about, the people who they're learning about.
Yeah.
And that's not to say it's a bad movie. I still very much like this movie.
Yeah.
But I do think that's, a dated aspect worthy of criticism and worthy of discussion.
Yeah. And so we get this introduction with, Michael Fowl, or is that his name, Michael Fowl?
Thomas Fowl.
Thomas Fowl. So Thomas, we get introduced to Fung when Thomas goes home and he lives with Fung.
Yeah.
And there's a brief like introductory context of, I would ask you to marry me, but my wife in London wouldn't grant me a divorce.
Yeah.
And that this is something that happens quite often with Thomas, that he travels to other countries to do stories and he has women in each pocket of the world, kind of. Which I hear you when it's like that's a dated idea. I'd say it's dated in the sense that it's accurate for the time. That, I mean, not even just like in the military aspect.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm sorry to say, but Full Metal Jacket, when they're in Vietnam and they're all picking up like Vietnamese hookers, like that was a thing that was happening all the time.
No, these things happen. The problem is the foregrounding of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And so And with the age gap and stuff, like I was a little bit like, but
Yeah.
because usually in story context for these situations of like a young Vietnamese woman and an older like foreign gentleman from a different country, a country from the West coming here, they're usually shadowed over a layer of like some sort of manipulation going on, some sort of like financial thing. And the movie doesn't do that. The movie comes in and says like, oh, well, he's here and she was working as a taxi dancer, which is like a step above like hooker in the movie's terms.
Yeah.
Because they do go to a brothel, I think is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, like she's a taxi dancer. And Fraser's like, oh, well, that's like one step above where we just were at the brothel. And he's like, I can't believe that she was a taxi dancer. And it's like, oh, it's like, yeah. And she was, I saw her there dancing and I purchased a ticket to dance with her. And, you know, I got her out of that life. It's sort of the white saviorism in that regard too. And outside of that realm of like, oh, this is like a guy who is like funding her way of life to not be in that scenario, the movie makes the attempt of like what love they have for each other is genuine, which I like.
Yeah.
Until she then goes for Fraser.
Yes.
Because there's a weird, slightly unbelievable shift that we'll get to later in the movie.
Yeah.
It's the letter scene, which I'm like, okay. So anyway, he invites Fraser over to grab dinner and go to this dancing place. There's a few other American characters that we're not going to learn about, but they're sprinkled in throughout the movie. Thomas Fowl also has like a Vietnamese assistant. It's like a guy who works at his office for him, who gives him information.
I want to talk about this guy because he's played by Zima.
Yeah.
Who I adore. Zima is like, do you see The Farewell?
No.
Okay, The Farewell, the Aquafina movie.
Actually, you know what? I think I may have seen it, but it was a while ago.
Lulu Wang, the 2019 movie about the grandma.
Yeah.
Who's passed away.
Right.
Basically, Zima is like he's played, you know, the Asian character in a lot of American movies.
Yeah.
For like 20 to 30 years. Including Arrival. I'm looking at his like he just plays like, you know, for lack of a better term, the token Asian character in a lot of American movies.
Yeah.
And then he just pops up in The Farewell and he's just incredible.
Yeah.
And I always get delighted when I see him pop up and stuff because he's a lovely little character actor who hasn't gotten his due.
Yeah.
And The Farewell was finally his due.
Good. That's great.
But I do like just talking about him when I see him.
Yeah. And so it's when I'm just gonna go straight to when they go to the dance scene together.
Yes.
Am I missing anything in between that?
No, I mean, like you said, like I think we're gonna kind of go through this plot quick.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of scenes that occur, but like it'll be like a 5-minute scene about the debates of communism versus liberty, and what are we going to do?
Exactly.
We could just say that scene happens.
Yeah. And so they go to this dance club. This is Fraser's first introduction to Fung, and the movie spares no expense in making you understand that he's falling in love with her right away. And somewhat similar for Fung to Fraser. So Fraser asks Fung to dance. They go dance. Fung's mother is a prominent character in this movie.
It's her sister.
Oh, it's her sister? It's not her mother?
Sister.
Oh, okay.
They explain that both their parents are dead.
Okay, understood. Well, in that regard then, so like her sister's involved, and her sister is trying to play like matchmaker with Alden Pyle and Fung, mostly because her sister knows that Thomas Fowl can't get married and can't take her back to London. And so she sees Alden Pyle as like, oh, he's an American, he's not married, like they can get married and she can go back with him to America and I can go with them, like sort of that kind of motivation, I guess.
We're also introduced to a group of other Americans at this point.
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier, but it's like I'm not going to talk about them.
I do want to talk about one of them.
Yeah.
There's like the CIA guy.
Is this the guy who's always drunk?
No, that's I don't know what his name is.
I don't know.
But there's the one CIA guy who like kind of just appears in the background for the rest of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
He's played by an actor named Robert Stanton.
Yeah.
Who also has basically just played like government lawyer in movies.
Mm-hmm.
But I was looking at his filmography, and I would like to point out his television career. May I quickly? In 1991, he was on Law and Order as Jed Knox. In 1997, he was on Law and Order as Jacob Sutter. In 2002, he was on Law and Order Criminal Intent as Dennis Griscom. In 2003, he was on Law and Order SVU as PBA representative. In 2003, he was on Law and Order as Tim Grayson. In 2006, he was on Law and Order as Douglas Preston. In 2010, he was on Law and Order Criminal Intent as Mr. Nauer school official.
Oh my god.
It's like that this man has been in every single Law and Order thing, including the core show 3 to 4 times, and played a different character every time.
Don't we love that?
I just felt that important to point out.
There's only so many actors you can cast in these day player roles.
Law and Order. Apparently, Robert Stanton's got a monopoly on it. Just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
We can resume back to the plot where now Fung is kind of, Fraser immediately falls in love with Fung. He
openly.
He says the phrase "love at first sight."
Yeah. And again, this is, the first thing that I think of next after this scene is that Thomas Fowl gets a telegram from the London Times and says you have to come back. And he doesn't want to come back because he likes Fung. And he's like, okay, well, I need an extension. And he's like, what can I use as an extension? And he's like, well, there is going to be a rebel attack at this northern village.
Fat Deem.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to go there.
Yeah.
And so we cut to Michael Caine in like full camo gear.
He's embedded with a French
troop. Like squadron.
Yeah.
And they're going through this little town. And this scene doesn't go 2 minutes until they hear something in the water, and they all duck down, and they see a boat coming out of the fog. And they aim their rifles and they start shooting, and like, no, don't shoot. And who is it?
Brendan Fraser. In the worst disguise I've ever seen. He's like wearing like a rice hat.
Yes.
That's his disguise.
Yeah. And he's like,
what the hell are you doing out here, innit?
It's like, well, I heard you were coming out to this village, and, I wanted to come with you. Why?
He says that he first tells them that he was trying to get upriver for a medical thing, and then he says, I actually came because of you.
Yeah.
To talk to him about Fung.
Right. Which
it's a little sweaty. And you're like, this doesn't quite make sense, but sure, if the movie needs us to believe this, whatever. But then when you learn the twist at the end about, Fraser being in the CIA, and it makes sense why he would be up there. And then he just happened to kind of come across Michael Caine's like, all right, I guess I'll do this.
That makes more sense now as I'm hearing about it. I didn't even think about that.
I think he does say he was actually looking for Caine because he didn't want him to get killed by the third faction.
Oh.
But he went up there to,
the guise is that I am in love with Fung and I came up here to tell you that, so I didn't do anything while you were away.
Yeah. The actual thing is, he's up there helping plan.
He didn't want Fung to Dear John him.
Yeah, he's trying to plan a massacre with the third faction to implicate the communists.
Yes, because what will happen is he joins forces. So Fraser joins this pact with Michael Caine and the other French squadron, and then they continue their search, and they're going, and they reach this village.
Yes.
And they find a bunch of dead bodies.
Yeah.
A lot of the villagers massacred, murdered.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the question's brought up, it's like, who did this? Like communists? And then Michael Caine says the very common, clear question. It's like, that isn't their... Like that
communists don't murder villagers.
That's not in their best interest.
Mm-hmm.
So sprinkling in the little like interesting, and then they're in like a little encampment around like this village, and that's when there's it's like, hey, we're suspecting that we're gonna get bombed tonight, so you guys should be in the bunker. We get a very I like this scene.
Oh, it's a good scene.
This is a good scene because like they get in the bunker and the bombs start dropping and you hear all the grenades going off and Fraser's trying to have this conversation like, so I came here for you.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because when I saw Fung, like it really was like love at first sight. And I want you to know that I think I can offer her a lot. It's very strange because he came here to be like, I want to steal your girl.
Yeah, Mr. Steal Your Girl.
But he was being very cordial about it. And Michael Caine's also like not being aggressive back to him because he's like, all right, good chop, have a good try.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of how he's responding.
Yeah, Michael Caine, he doesn't like other people being in love with her, but he knows like that someone else is her best bet to get out of the country.
Yeah, it's a very strange. It's very strange because in the background of all this happening, like bombs are dropping around them, and every once in a while they react to it, but then they kind of morph back to the conversation.
Yeah,
it's very interesting and very strange in a surreal kind of way.
Yeah, and like the whole obviously the camera operator's just shaking the camera.
Yeah,
but it's just like this whole shakiness of this whole scenario that they're on.
Yeah,
even the ground is shaking beneath them.
Yeah.
Everything's getting ready to explode.
Yeah. It's a good scene.
Yes.
So they wake up the next morning and Michael Caine wakes up.
They go back to Saigon.
Yeah, and he sees that Fraser's not there. Like he left early. And so Fal goes back to Saigon, reports his findings back to the London Times to give him a month extension.
Like they say investigate massacre further.
Yeah, investigate massacre further. And so
the movie basically takes two paths at this point.
Yes.
One of them we're following the Caine, Pyle, Fung storyline.
The love triangle,
The love triangle. The other we're covering his investigation into what's going on.
Yes.
With this massacre.
Yes. And
the thing that keeps happening is Pyle keeps popping up in his other story about the massacre. Like trying to find out what happened with the massacre.
Yeah. So the first instance of this is they go to a military parade.
Yes.
Where
they accidentally come across a military parade. They're trying to get back to their office.
Right. So trying to get back to their office. And this is not with Fraser. This is just with Fal.
Yeah.
Fal's there with his assistant, I think.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, we're getting stuck in this parade. And so they get out and he sees Pyle there watching the parade.
Yeah.
And the parade is a celebration of the
General Trey.
Yeah, General Tay.
Yeah.
Promotion or
just that he has announced he's starting a
third party
to run in the election.
Yes.
Essentially.
Starting a third party
as opposed to both the French and the communists.
Yes. So, and Fraser and Pyle do a little walk and talk. This is just a very well blocked scene in the sense of like you have the like I like this in the sense that there's a lot of background.
Yeah.
And it's a very good utilization of like background movements and this celebration of the background of like a third party. And meanwhile Fraser's there and him and Michael Caine are sort of talking about like, what do you know about General Tay? Like, is he a good guy? Like, I kind of heard he was a maniac. And he's like, well, Vietnam, like they need like a third force. It's like they need like somebody who, we got to get rid of the communists, but they need, we need to liberate them. And that's where we get that conversation of like, well, what's liberty? If they elect Ho Chi Minh, is that liberty? All this while happening, you have like crowds of people celebrating this third party.
This essentially American-run dictator.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. So Caine goes to investigate him. General Tay.
Yeah. Right. He drives out to his like camp or something.
Where he happens to come across Pyle, who's there under the guise of helping with the medical operation.
Yeah.
While he's there, he sees a bunch of canisters of some substance. He doesn't pay much attention to it at that point.
Yeah.
But it does come back later, though.
It's like a milk wax thing.
Yeah, dioclayton or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Dioclayton, I think it is.
And so there's a scene where like, Fal is trying to like get a face-to-face meeting with General Tay, in which he does.
Yeah.
But
it's very short.
It's very short, and not a lot gets accomplished in this conversation.
Yeah, he immediately asks him like, so what's your involvement with the American? The guy's like, I'm out of here.
It's like, get him out of here. I don't want to talk to him. And so he doesn't really get any answers. There's not a lot is accomplished in this scene. I don't know. This scene felt very thin to me.
It's very much like he gets the second he starts prying, because I think that General Tay is expecting him to ask like about him, instead of starting to like pry into like he asked him, were your men anywhere near where this massacre occurred?
Yes, right.
And it just it's shut down pretty quick.
Yeah. And so him and Fraser have to then get back, but as they start driving, they run out of gas because that they took all of his petrol.
Yeah, well, he points out, he's like, look at those nice chaps cleaning my car.
Yes, he does point that out.
Yeah, and it's like General Tay ordered his gas siphoned.
Yeah.
But they break down next to a watchtower.
Yeah.
And they go over to see if there's any gas, and they find 2 terrified soldiers inside.
Who are they're just locals, right? They're not communists?
They're soldiers. I don't remember what faction they're a part of, though.
Because they're hostile to Fraser and Fowl, but more out of fear.
Yes. Michael Caine does say like that there's soldiers in all these watchtowers.
Mm-hmm.
But then another faction, I believe it's the communists, come along.
Because what happens, it says like they start hearing some bombshells go off, and they're like, "It's okay. Only 1 or 2 of these watchtowers go down a night. I think we're okay."
Yeah, because they do say like the communists run the road at night.
Yeah,
a bunch of like communist forces appear. They blow up the car and they blow up the watchtower.
Yeah,
Fraser and Caine barely escape. But they do escape.
Yeah.
The next day, the French find them and bring them back to Saigon.
Yeah.
This movie entirely actually shot in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Every scene set there, so it looks good in that respect.
Yeah, it does.
Because they go back to Saigon. Can't escape Saigon.
Yeah, just to kind of catch up on the love triangle plot line. At one point, Michael Caine does tell Fung that he gets a letter back from his wife that she will approve the divorce, which means they can get married, and she can come back to London with him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that gets said, and then the next reveal is, I think like Fraser and Fung both come into his office and they confront him about the letter and that it's a lie.
Mm.
Because what's actually written in the letter is that she is not going to approve the divorce, that you do this with every country you go to. You just find a girl, and he basically lied to Fung. And what this does is Fraser confronts him about Fung. There's a really interesting scene where he shows up at his apartment and Fung's there.
Yeah.
And he's like, I've come here to talk to Fung. And he's like, okay, well, take a seat.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I thought we could talk alone. It's like, I'll stay.
Yeah.
But he's being very cordial about it. It's very strange, very British polite.
Yeah.
And it's like, I can be better for Fung. Like, I can offer security. Like, I was trying to find a link between the American interventionism through line with the love triangle. I think there was something there, kind of, but like, I don't really know.
I think Fung is supposed to be representative of the country.
Yeah.
Of Vietnam, and like they're fighting over her and
who
thereby the country.
Is best suited for
like what idea is best suited for the country.
But they're the same ideas, right?
Like, well, Caine is very much like, you shouldn't be involved. You should just be a bystander at the start. And Fraser literally is all about intervention and stepping into other people's affairs, which is, physicalized in him literally interceding in their relationship and stealing her.
Yeah.
And
but their end goal is with Fung is the same though, right? They want to marry her and take her out of Vietnam.
At the beginning.
At the beginning. It changes at the end, but at the beginning it's like what their goals are.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a little stuck on that a little bit. I was like, but wait a minute. Like, where's the conflict and what? I mean, the conflict is that they will love Fung and Fung has to choose one, obviously. And I get the resolve at the end when Fowl's like, no, I don't want to take you to London with me. I actually want to stay.
I've fallen in love with you, not just what you represent.
Right. So
basically, the next like 30 minutes are him just uncovering the plot.
Yeah.
Which he and his assistant, they go to the factory of a man who's been helping out General Tay. They find a bunch of
the milk wax.
Yeah, dioclayton.
Yeah.
Which he looks up, and it can be used for explosive devices.
Well, hold on a second, because this is where we get the explosion, isn't it?
It's right after this.
Well, I think he discovers that the milk carton thing is explosives after the explosion. Because he discovers the milk carton diocycline thing, and he starts asking around about it. It's like, and he asks Fraser, and he's like, "What is this?" Oh yeah, we supply diocycline. It's good for, like, it's a waxy substance that's good for, like,
something for eyes.
Yeah, something for, like, medical tools and stuff that we provide for, that we provide to these people. And he's like, okay. And at first it does seem like innocent. And you're like, okay. Yeah. And then it's the explosion scene.
Yeah, he's just sitting at a cafe and he starts noticing shifty characters about. A lot of Americans.
Yeah.
And one guy who's just, like, going from car to car.
Yeah.
And there's a photographer.
Yeah.
And then 2 cars explode and 30 people die. It's like this massive explosion. Windows are blown out. People are lying without legs in the street.
This was a well shot
this
sequence.
Is a beautiful sequence. Well, beautiful in a grotesque way.
Yes, because when everything explodes, like, you just see Michael Caine walking in, like, a daze throughout all this, because he immediately runs over and tries to help people, and he's trying to help folks who are gravely injured in the streets, and he sees Brendan Fraser wandering around, and he stards directing photographers.
Yeah, like, take pictures of this, take pictures of that.
Yeah. And he starts speaking fluent Vietnamese,
which he earlier in the movie said he didn't know how to speak.
Yeah.
And Caine has his, like, Kaiser Soze moment.
Yes.
Where he puts it all together in his head that Fraser is a CIA operative.
Because he's
directing these attacks to build sympathy in the U.S. Congress.
Because he's blaming all of the massacres, all the bombings on the communists.
Yes.
Who are not doing this.
Yes.
And so this is when he, like, discovers that this diocycline stuff is also used for plastic explosive components. Yeah. And so the pieces all connect.
Yeah.
He discovers it, and the next thing I remember is
he confronts Fraser about it.
But what was that scene like? I don't really remember it much.
Well, so this is a very smart bit of acting from Fraser's. He does shift his performance after this moment, and then he seems more openly sinister, and he's a lot more like, he was kind of playing up his, like, lovability earlier. He's like, oh, I'm just a doctor. And, like, even in the more serious scenes, he's kind of still has that lovable goofball energy to him.
Yeah.
He cuts that all off right at this moment. Immediately, he's playing, like, stoic American CIA operative.
I just don't remember
tough guy.
The scene that much. Like, where does it happen at?
The
like,
scene is
in his office, or, like,
he talks to his assistant about it.
Yeah,
he kind of lays it all out. Like, here's what I saw.
Yeah.
And his assistant is like, I have some friends on the communist side who'd be interested to talk with him.
Yeah.
And Caine is like, would he be hurt? And they'd be like, we treat him as well as the nicest he deserves.
Mm.
And Caine's like, all right, what do we got to do? And he's like, all right, well, talk to him and see if you can arrange meeting him for dinner this place at this time. He has bodyguards now, but he won't bring them if he thinks he's just meeting you.
Yeah.
So what you're going to do is you're going to invite him to your house. We're going to have a guy watching your window. If you open a book in the window, we'll know that the dinner is on, and we'll set it up.
Jesus fuck. I forgot and didn't catch any of this shit. God damn it. That's so good.
Yeah. And so
I totally missed that part.
And so he goes to dinner, or he invites
him over to his place.
Yeah, to his place, and he just immediately confronts him.
Yeah.
And Caine is just he confronts him about, like, all this stuff, and Fraser cops to it. He's not trying to disguise himself anymore, but he shifts his performance here. He's a lot more sinister.
Yes, now it's coming back.
He's like, we're gonna bring liberty to this country.
Yeah.
This is the way it has to be done.
Yeah.
They have a full debate, and they're playing. There's a really cool detail that Caine is just like picking up books all over his apartment and like moving them back to his bookshelf, and you never know which is the book he's going to use to essentially sign Fraser's death certificate.
Yeah.
Because he internally knows that if he opens that book, he's killing this man.
Yeah.
And he finally decides to do it when the concept of Fung is brought up. And Fraser is also like, I hope in spite of our political differences, we can still be friends. I enjoy our chats. And Caine's like, all right. And he opens the book in the window, and there's one Vietnamese guy goes like, he looks at him.
Yeah.
And then he drives off in his little moped.
What was the book that he opened?
He opens a book of poetry.
Oh.
And I cannot, let me see if I can find the poem, because it's a very smart poem that he says in this moment.
Yeah, I forgot about the book opening is the signal thing. I totally missed that part. Fucking hell, that's such a good part about it.
The Quiet American poem. Okay, here it is. He reads this poem to Fraser. He's like, have you ever heard this poem before? I drive through the streets and care... I'm just going to say it in my because this is good. He says, I drive through the streets and care not a damn. The people, they stare and they ask who I am. And then Fraser, who has heard this poem before, immediately picks up and says, and if I should chance to run over a cad, I can pay for the damage if ever so bad. And it's like just that both of them have different interpretations of this. That Caine is like, it's a poem about like coming somewhere where you don't know, not giving a damn,
causing a lot of havoc.
Causing havoc, but you can pay to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And Fraser kind of reads that as like, yeah, I come over, but don't worry because I can fix all the problems.
If I were to tell you that I was a stranger traveling from the east, seeking of which that is lost,
I would say that I'm a stranger from the west, as I who you seek. I thought you were about to do the I am Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look at my works, ye mighty, and despair.
Oh well, there's that.
And despair.
And despair.
But that's the poem that he reads to sign his death warrant.
Mm-hmm.
And then Fraser's like, all right, I'll meet you for dinner tonight. And then the next scene is just Michael Caine sitting at this restaurant.
Yeah.
And he spies Fraser walking across the docks towards him.
And then Fraser gets jumped.
Fraser gets surrounded by 4 guys and brought into an alley.
He tries to run away and escape.
Yeah. But meanwhile, I do want to say a drunk American who we met a few times in the movie does come and sit across from Caine.
Yeah.
And start like...
he starts like, my boy has polio at home, and I don't care if he's a cripple. I just want him to be alive.
Yeah.
It was very fascinating for that to be the overtone while this is happening to Fraser in the alley.
I think what's cool is we're cutting between Fraser manages to escape and he's running, and we cut between Fraser running, looking right into Caine's eyes, and then hearing, I don't care if he's crippled, but I don't want him to die. And it's like essentially Caine's inner monologue of like, I don't want this man to die. I just want him to be crippled and badly hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But Fraser does die.
Yeah.
He gets stabbed by Zima.
Mm-hmm.
He's just stabbed right in the heart, and then he gets thrown in the river.
Yeah.
And the next scene is this is a weird transition here.
It is a bit
because we jump immediately back to the flash forward from earlier.
Yeah.
But we skip over the finding the Fraser body and stuff.
Yeah, it's now the inspector talking to Michael Caine in his office.
He comes to Michael Caine's house.
Yes.
He's like, can I meet you downstairs?
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, I'll get a Fanny Branca. He comes downstairs with him, and he's like, so we found a dog print in the front step of your house.
Yeah.
And the dog had concrete in its feet.
I remember this scene too, and I was very confused.
And Michael Caine's like, a lot of dogs have concrete in their feet. What are you trying to say? And then he's like, we looked, and you only reserved a table for 1 that night. Which, poor move on Michael Caine's part.
Yeah.
He should have ordered a table for 2, and then been like, all right, the other guy's not coming.
Yeah.
But yeah, he.
What was the dog with the concrete bit though?
Just that they found concrete in the dog's foot, and they found a dog print matching that dog right outside of Michael Caine's apartment from the day that Fraser died.
What does a dog have anything to do with it, though?
He had the dog with him, and it's Fraser's dog. So just that this footprint indicates that Fraser was at Michael Caine's apartment.
Fraser's dog. I forgot that he got a dog.
Yeah, that Fraser was at Caine's apartment the same day that he died. And then Michael Caine's like, I have nothing further to add to my story besides my first... In the shiftiest fucking tone possible. He doesn't play, like, dumb or anything. He's just like, I got nothing else to add except what I said previously.
To the best
the inspector's like, yeah, you fucking killed the guy. Oh, I did not kill him.
To the best of my recollection, I have no memory of such incident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's and then Caine goes back upstairs. That's basically the end of the movie. I think he gets one more scene with Fung.
He gets one more scene with Fung where they're talking about, like, you know, you can move back in with me if you want.
Yeah.
And
she's like, there's no point. You can't bring me back to London.
And then he says, it's like, I'm not going back to
London.
London.
You don't understand. I'm staying here because I have learned to care about this country and that I have an opinion on it.
Yeah.
And it's that I don't want the Americans to fuck this up.
Yeah. And then the movie does something very interesting and smart because we cut to credits.
Yeah.
But the credits are preceded by newspaper clippings of further American interventionist events. Yeah. But something important to note, though, book comes out 1954 or 1955. The events in the book take place in 1951. They show events happening in the movie that happen after 1955. Yeah. So, like, the author wouldn't know of these things happening, but it's still...
Yeah, the movie's able to have that.
But it's able to have that point because, again, the book and the movie called it shot.
Yeah.
But American interventionism. So it warrants it because, you know, it shows clippings of Americans start sending aid. Or the first thing is, like, the 17th parallel is established. And then the next one is, like, Ho Chi Minh invades the South.
And then it's American troops go over.
Yep.
And then
Boots
Johnson
on the ground.
Escalates the war.
Right. Bombing.
Like 400,000.
400,000 troops are there. Like Cambodia gets bombed. Like all this stuff happening.
The final image is a zoom in on one of the newspaper articles into the eyes of an American soldier who looks terrified and is wearing
wounded.
A bandage.
Yeah. And
that's the final image.
Yeah. Beautiful.
What a good fucking movie. I very much enjoyed this movie.
Very good movie.
There is one scene we didn't talk about that I quickly want to say before we do the post-text.
Yeah.
There's one point where Caine is looking for Fraser and he storms to the American embassy. And it's all done in this one shot where he just kind of like storms and he's like, "Where'd that white guy?"
Oh yeah, because he hurt his ankle or something when he fell off the thing, right?
Yeah, when he jumped off the watchtower.
But
he was looking for Fraser and he's like, "Tell him to come save me."
Yeah.
And he kind of just storms around. He's like, I know I'm being very bad, but in my position, I think being bad is what I intend to do.
Because he's being a lot worse.
Yes. And then he storms around. He can't find Fraser, and he goes into a bathroom and just starts crying.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't like the man he's becoming.
Yeah.
That's an incredible bit of acting for Michael Caine in that sequence.
Yeah.
It probably earned him his Oscar nomination.
Who won that year?
Let me find out. Whoa. 2003. It would be the 2003 Oscars, the 75th Academy Awards. Best actor went to Adrian Brody for The Pianist.
Yeah, that's probably earned.
Yeah, and Michael Caine had won fairly recently, I believe.
Nomination or win?
I think he had won an Oscar for Hannah and Her Sisters, maybe, or maybe I'm getting this wrong. I'm getting this all mixed up.
Does he have an Oscar?
He has 2. Yes, he would run only 2 years before for The Cider House Rules in 1999. So he had won fairly recently.
Okay.
It is worthy to note that Michael Caine has said multiple times this is his favorite performance that he's given. He thinks this is one of his best, if not his best.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't entirely dispute that. Like, I'm not going to argue with him about it. There are Michael Caine performances I somewhat prefer, but this is one of his best.
Yeah, I would agree. And Fraser is good.
Yeah.
I as we said before, it's like Fraser has I think personally, I don't know if you agree or disagree with me on this, Jeff, but I think Fraser has a harder role to fulfill than Caine does.
Yes.
Because he's not really playing a character. He's playing an idea.
Yeah. And in real life, he's playing like an amalgamation of multiple like American figures.
Exactly. Yeah. So and he does it successfully. It's
Yes.
believable. The whole this movie, that role could have easily had been like, who are you? Oh, I'm the American medical doctor coming to help. He. You know what I mean? But Fraser does a good job of passing off like a harmless, just there to help person, and then slowly but surely like starts to like you see him in more like unsettling circumstances.
Yeah.
Without changing his tone though. And then it's not until like he does the rapid shift, but it's believable because you know all the stuff he's been involved in.
Yes.
Like I thought he had a hard job to do, and I thought he did it very, very well in this movie.
Fully agree.
Yeah.
Fraser's good. Caine's incredible, and the movie is great.
What does that mean for post-text though?
In terms of post-text, this movie comes out. It gets pushed a year, as we talked about. It gets very strong reviews. It debuts in the Toronto International Film Festival in 2002. Finally, gets critical acclaim. It is, heavily favored to get a lot of Academy Award nominations. It only secures Best Actor for Caine.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big year, so it cannot be blamed. The Best Picture nominees this year are Chicago, Gangs of New York, The Hours, The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, and The Pianist.
Yeah, that's a hard
You'll
line.
probably get rid of The Pianist because Roman Polanski probably should have been in prison instead of making that movie, but
vis-a-vis.
Yeah, but it happened. This movie doesn't really make a lot of money. It's a $30 million budget. It comes in under that. But
Yeah.
I don't think many people are upset. Miramax lost a lot of money on movies at this time. So I don't think anyone's like crippled that The Quiet American wasn't a blockbuster success.
Yeah.
But this movie has, it hasn't really had like a major connection. I think it is worthy of note as a very interesting post 9/11 movie, even if it wasn't designed as such. A movie that's warning us about like, hey, maybe like, American intervention is not the best idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I would say that's the extent of the post-text. In terms of Fraser's career, he still is kind of after this point he's still stuck in the like blockbuster lane.
Yeah.
He does get, his opportunities to be in dramas again. He's in Crash in 2 years, which we'll talk about when we talk about it.
Yeah.
But this is, it's more of an outlier at this point, and it doesn't really do much for him.
Yeah.
It's worthy of note in his career, but it doesn't do much for him.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good movie.
Yeah, good movie. I think that's all we can really say about it.
Yeah. I know it's a little shorter episode, but I feel like we got all our thoughts out that we needed to.
It's nice that we finally got an episode where it's just the two of us again.
Yeah.
And
it's nice that it's a movie like this.
Yeah. The last time we did an episode about a movie that was just you and me, it was Still Breathing.
In which we were just sweating over it.
Yeah, I was just fucking horny on Maine.
You were swallowing the mic, Jeff.
I was swallowing the mic. It was good.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think you have anything else to say about this movie, about The Quiet American?
No, it made me more fascinated to research the Vietnam War, conflict.
Like I said, Ken Burns, the Vietnam War, if anyone's interested.
I'll look that up.
All right, well, as always, thank you for listening to this episode. Make sure to tune in next week for our episode on Dickie Roberts, former child star, a movie in similar tone to The Quiet American. A movie that is very much about, American interventionism. It's a David Spade comedy about a former child star.
Interesting.
It's going to be great. There's John Lovitz in it.
Yeah.
Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. As a reminder, we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Pop into our Reddit, r/Travolti. You can find us on Twitter or Instagram at TravoltingPod. Email us TravoltingPodcast@gmail.com. Find me on Twitter at Jeff W. Sweeney.
You can find me on Instagram at Stuart95. I am just discovered that you can watch episode 1 of the Ken Burns Vietnam War documentary for free on Amazon Prime.
Very cool.
And then the following episodes after that, you do have to have a subscription to PBS Documentaries, or you can simply just buy the episodes for $5 a pop. I don't think I would buy the episodes for $5 a pop. I think I just get a free trial for the PBS documentary and just binge it all.
Yes. Good to know. I can also mail anyone who emails me the Blu-ray. I'm not going to do that.
His address is 19.
Special thanks, as always, to Rebecca Johnson for our graphic design, Angie Gardner for our social media, and Michael Van Bodegum Smith for the theme music that is now taking you out. Have a great week, folks, and see you next time for Dickie Roberts.
Dickie Roberts.